Hello once again. This is a homily for the second Sunday of the year. The year obviously is 2021. And today we are in ordinary time as we started on Monday. And being in ordinary time, the readings tend to teach us a lot more about the ordinary life of faith. Because there's nothing ordinary about it, but it's not a day when we celebrate a feast. Here we're basically learning something about how we are meant to see the world, and this is important because people around us who are not Christian don't see the world this way at all. And if we learn from them, we are going to have a problem when we try to think about moral questions, think about how should I respond in a particular situation, what should I value, all these kinds of things come up. So here we start a little instruction on how we need to see the world. And the church has chosen a reading from the first book of Samuel, and it is the call of Samuel. You know the story as well as I do. Basically, he learns to respond to God when God calls him. Speak, for your servant is listening. A couple of things to note here. He calls himself a servant. Eli, his boss, his leader, his religious master, in many ways, was there to teach him. And this is way before David is chosen and then anointed by Samuel. And so what we have here is Samuel now being called, and he has to learn the response from Eli. Eli is essentially the grand old man who has been leading worship, etc., in the temple, and who has two sons who are involved in the priesthood. And what we need to draw, first of all, from this is that this call is not just a call for somebody who is going to have a special religious role. We all have special religious roles. If we are baptized, it's kind of difficult to handle because how can I imagine 10 million people having special religious calls? But in fact, every single one of us was called uniquely by God and is uniquely being prepared to be a Christian in this particular situation. Now, we could say a million more things about it, but so we can't minimize who we are and the fact that we're called just because there's an awful lot of people who have been called. A second point is to hear God, and this in itself can be a really important action and an important expectation as well, because what has happened is we have so many other things calling us, and it can be possessions, it can be spending time watching television, it can be hanging around with our friends, it can be all kinds of things that take away from possible time when we could hear the Lord. Third thing is that he says, speak, for your servant is listening. Samuel sees himself as a servant of God. So he is not full of illusions about how important he is and what he's due, or what kind of respect should he be getting, and so forth. This is just simply a young man who obviously seems to be a pretty pure individual and who consequently is simply able to acknowledge he's a humble person before God. He's no great gift to the universe. Anyway, he gets called and he responds and knows his place as being a servant of the Most High God. The psalm picks up Samuel's words, "Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will." And what you have here is our chance to respond by saying, because notice the pronoun I stays, and so all the people in the congregation are saying, "Here am I, Lord, I come to do your will." And it's your will. And remember, we say that also in the Our Father. May your will be done, which is really the only reason for me being on earth, is to do God's will in this place at this time. The psalm moves through various things. I waited for the Lord. He stooped toward me and heard my cry. This is describing the life of a faithful man who is literally hearing God when he needs to hear God. Sacrifice or offering you wished not, but ears open to obedience you gave me. Again, obedience, very unpopular word in the 21st century. It is the key to serving God. If I'm baptized, I am a servant of God. I'd better get used to obeying him, because essentially it's going to be me who carries his will into my situation during my time of life. And this can be very difficult or very easy. That just depends on the circumstances, and I don't get to choose the circumstances. There's a lot more here about the relation with God. The psalmist is literally speaking for us. He's telling us what, in fact, we ought to be experiencing and doing. The second reading goes deeply into just one area of this living in this relationship, this bond with God. Brother and sisters, Paul says, the body is not for morality, but for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. Again, this is unique because it comes from Revelation. It contradicts everything, about 99%, of things that are said about the body in our culture. Again, we have no time to deal with that. John Paul II did a wonderful book on the theology of the body. That could be a great place to read and to start. But we are called to use our bodies with incredible respect, because they are expressions of our souls. So literally, where do I want my body to be? How do I want to use my body so that I am keeping my bond with God, because he's at the other end of that relationship that he has set up with me, uniquely me. And since my bodily presence is very important, because it can carry a message all of its own, simply by helping, let's say, a homeless person on the street, I'm there bodily, and I can give the guy a $10 bill or talk to him or whatever is needed, and I can be there bodily present as an extension of this relationship that God has set up with me. So I can be literally his charity in a certain sense. There's a lot more here. We should, in fact, learn from Paul because of the depth of teaching in the notion of the body. Anyhow, going on then, we come to the gospel, John's gospel in this case, and this is another calling, not the calling of Samuel this time, but the calling of Peter and Andrew, and literally they are absolutely ecstatic with delight because we have found the Messiah, which is the Jewish word for what we would call the Christ, the Anointed One. And Jesus takes them in immediately. You are Simon, and you will be called Cephas, which is translated as Peter. So this is a momentous moment for Peter and for the church as well, because this is the tiny, tiny beginnings of the great church that we now respond to and serve. But the key is always obedience. It is always service. It is always hearing God. Thank you.